Well, howdy ho. Hopefully everything is good video quality wise. The sun started to come out, so I thought I would change the camera angle a little bit. But today I am going to be talking about alternative theories, also known as conspiracy theories. So I hope you guys had fun watching this video. Had past tense. Good job, Stacy. I hope you have fun watching this video. And yeah, so I was gonna have a photo shoot tonight, but it got canceled because it's supposed to rain. If you can hear the thunder and rumbling, I don't know, but it better rain because I'm very sad that it got canceled. So yeah, let's just get right into the topic of the video. So to have an open mind is very imperative. If you hold tightly onto your beliefs of the world and you don't really like pondering and questioning, then this isn't the video for you. It might ruffle your feathers. But I just like to wonder. And so it's very fun to research and look into these alternative theories that aren't mainstream, that go against the official narrative. So let's start off with the JFK assassination. I personally hold the belief that it was an inside job from the CIA and that there were multiple shooters, and there's multiple videos out there and I guess articles or web search stuff that you can look at with more of the details with all the ins and outs of that one. So I am under the belief that it was because JFK wanted to disband the Federal Reserve and the CIA and do stuff that they didn't like. They plotted against him and killed him. And there's just a lot of inconsistencies with the actual event, things that the Secret Service did or didn't do, and then the bullet holes and things like that. So that is the first one. It's kind of a famous one. It's actually where the term conspiracy theorist came from the CIA after the whole JFK assassination. They wanted to keep people quiet and not question the official narrative that they gave out, so they came up with that term to kind of gaslight and, make people turn away from looking into things. So that one is probably one of the most famous ones. It's probably the one that is maybe most well believed by people, or at least looked into and entertained. So I thought I would start off with a bang with that one. Now, the next one, which is a pretty big one, I think a lot of people have looked into or discussed or pondered this one as well. Now, whether they believe it or not is a different question, but it's 9/11. So this is pretty relevant since I am filming this in September and posting it in September. There's actually a podcast called Whiskey, Beer, and Conspiracies Podcast. It's like the ultimate bros podcast. I love it though. They come up with a new episode almost every single Friday. And they have a series that they're doing right now. Currently, they have 2 episodes out. I haven't listened to the second one since it just came out today, since I'm filming this on a Friday. But it's about the 9/11 towers and the whole narrative and stories and things like that. They really look into it and do a deep dive. So that is really fun to listen to. I woke up to 9/11 probably 2.5 years ago now, when I did my first political awakening. I did a political awakening, and then I did my first little alternative theories awakening during that time as well. It blew my socks off learning about Tower 7. If you don't know about Tower 7, you and me are the same up until 2019, of course. I grew up post 9/11, meaning I was technically alive, but I was 3 years old. So I always heard the official narrative. I wasn't really cognizant of what was going on that day or time, but I do remember in school learning about it, watching the documentaries, hearing the stories, the whole shebang. And I never knew about Tower 7 until I started to look into the alternative theories about what actually happened and was going on behind the scenes. So I also believe that was an inside job by Bush, the president at the time, and other people involved. There was trillions of dollars missing. There was evidence in the Pentagon, and then Tower 7 had some evidence. And so they, I believe, were explosives that set off the buildings. I do not think they just collapsed because of airplanes, and then also with Tower 7, no airplane even potentially crashed into that. Now, there's a lot of different theories on were there actually planes, was it all holograms, was it like missiles? That I'm not completely 100% sure. I do think that potentially real planes did crash into the buildings. I don't think that's the reason why they collapsed, but I do believe that there were real planes with the two buildings. Now, with the Pentagon, I do think that was a missile because they don't have any footage of the plane hitting, and then just the trajectory of how it hit and the remains and things like that. I think that was a missile, but I do think the other ones were probably real planes. The hologram theory is a fun one to entertain, but I don't know if I 100% buy that theory, as of now at least. And I also think that there was a lot of cover-up. There's a person who lost someone, and she got, she was offered money to keep quiet and kind of not pursue anything legally, and she didn't take it, and then she ended up eventually dying in a plane crash, I believe. So pretty, ooh, the thunder, the rain is coming, I better hurry up. I really don't want it to rain when I start filming, so hopefully I can get through this pretty quick before it does, because your girl is gonna run inside real fast because this is an expensive camera. So that's 9/11. There's more I could go into with that. There's a lot more details with that, but kind of a little overview is what I want to give you. So those are the two really, really big ones. And the third really big one is the moon. The moon landing, was it real, was it fake? The whole, debate on that. I personally believe that it was fake. It was not real. I do not think that we have ever landed on the moon. I don't think that we can land on the moon. And I think it was filmed in a Hollywood studio. And I think a lot of the space stuff happens underwater with NASA. All of the images of Earth are composite images. They are not real images. So the whole NASA thing, landing on the moon, you can believe that we can't land on the moon and not delve into flat Earth or the biblical Earth model, whatever you want to call it, but they're kind of connected in a way, but you can separate them. So there's the moon one, and then there's the flat Earth one. Sometimes people connect them, sometimes they keep them separate, but I think a lot of people question the moon landing or just kind of wonder about it. It's like, why have we never been back? Why was the technology lost? Things like that. And then there's like things like the camera and the lights and the wind and just things like that just don't add up or make sense. And there's been a lot of people pointing out those inconsistencies. And so that's the moon landing one. Again, I don't think we ever landed on the moon. And then it kind of delves into the biblical Earth model. So, we'll say about flat Earth, one that gets everyone's ruffles feathered, whatever the phrase is. I do not know for sure the shape of the Earth, what it looks like, all that shebang. All I say is they're composite images. They're not real images. They're composite from NASA. So we don't really know for certain what the Earth looks like. We're just going off of people's word, what they say. So that's what I'm going to say on that. I have delved into the flat Earth thing. I lean on that side, but I don't know for sure. I like to question and wonder. And I think when we look at our own observations and it's starting to sprinkle. I'm going to have to go inside. But, it's just questioning and wondering and speculating and knowing what we can know and see and test for ourselves and what we believe based off of the knowledge we have and things like that. I know people get all ruffled by a feather with that, but it's just an alternative theory that I've looked into myself and that I tend to lean towards believing, but I could be wrong. Like, I could be wrong about all of these. Maybe 9/11 wasn't an inside job. Maybe JFK was just killed by Lee Oswald, and that's just that. But there's a lot of, questions to be raised with all these alternative theories, and I like to raise questions. I like to wonder and investigate. I like to follow the money. I mean, looking at the Rothschilds and Rockefeller and looking at what they had their hand in with allopathic medicine and the school system and a lot of their corruption with that. Like, you just look at the things that they're doing, the things that they have pushed or are pushing, and where the money follows. Same with the media. Like, who is paying the media companies? Is it just one person that owns all the companies? Is it multiple people? Looking at the money, I think, is a huge thing. Look at the money, follow the money trail, look who has the influence and the power, and how that is being portrayed to the public and their agenda. Like, look at their worldview and kind of break it down from there. You can do that with the whole climate change thing. I really don't think that the climate's changing, oh no, we only have 10 more years, everything's going to be underwater, blah, blah, blah. I think that is just a whole hoopla to get people to follow certain laws and certain restrictions and mandates and to have power and control and to cause fear in people. I mean, if you cause my entire generation to think that a certain place is going to be completely underwater by the time they're 30, they're going to have so much fear that they're going to be willing to give over their rights and freedoms to the governments or the corporations or whatever you want to call it to do whatever they want and to have these laws and mandates of things you can and can't do. Everyone can fit in the state of Texas comfortably. There is so much land and so much resources on this earth. Guys, we're fine. God's got us. We do have a responsibility to steward the earth. Oh my gosh, I can't talk about climate change. I could do a whole video on the whole climate change thing and earth. Save it for another day. So there's that. And then other ones, let's think. Trying to think of other ones. Well, there's the whole like Hollywood satanic ritual abuse things, which again, okay, so some of these I see as alternative theories. Like, yes, we can keep them in the alternative theory bubble. And then some of these, I'm like, no, this is just straight up like fact. You know what I mean? It's like, you follow the money with the Rothschilds, like that's a fact. I mean, sure, I can come up with my own conclusions based off of the evidence I have, but the fact of the matter is they had their hand in money in the school system and medicine system, just like George Soros has his hand in the media. You know, it's like, that's a fact. That's not a conspiracy theory. Now, I guess, alternative theories you can come up with is the whys, you know, what's the motivation behind that with like Bill Gates and his vaccines, and what is his agenda? Well, his agenda is to depopulate the earth. So how is he going to do that if that's his main goal? So things like that, it's just like, and then looking into the Vatican and the City of London and how those are like their own countries. Like, there's London, the city, and then there's their City of London. Very different. And then you also look into the wars, you know, World War II, for example, and how the baking families funded both sides of the war. And you kind of like, you just start to dig past the narrative that they feed you. I think that they give you, and when I say they, I mean like the government, the schools, the system, the media, give you a piece of the truth. And then that's all they give you, just a piece. They don't give you the full, expansive, broad story. For example, there's, I think it was called Operation Paperclip, where they brought the Nazi scientists over to NASA. And it's just like, what is going on here? So a lot of this stuff comes out years later, like with the Tuskegee experiment with giving black people syphilis. Like, the government did that, or with MK Ultra and the CIA doing experiments on humans to test their minds and their psychosis of stuff. So those come out as true years later when it's irrelevant. But then you have to question, well, if the government was doing that then, what's to say they're not doing similar stuff now? And I think that's the inference that a lot of people make. I mean, humans are humans, and as much as we like to think we're so altruistic and have changed and better ourselves, like, we're still very sinful people doing evil things. It just might be evil, it might be different evil things. So that's kind of the whole conspiracy theory, alternative theory stuff. I'm sure I could go into more topics, but those were like the big ones. And just question things like elections, you know? Was it the most secure election? Do you feel like there was fraud? Do you feel like you get to actually choose your government officials, or do you feel like they are kind of chosen for you? Why do you have that gut feeling? And kind of investigate that. Look at the protocols and procedures that are put in place. For example, I love the podcast I mentioned, Whiskey Beyond Conspiracies podcast, because they don't just talk about conspiracies, they talk about like true crime and other things like that. But one of the episodes, they got a guy who was very versed in Constitution, like the California Constitution, and apparently there's 2 constitutions. And that's like super weird and strange. And so he explains and breaks that down. And it's because he is doing the research and he's questioning and he's looking into things that most people would just never even consider looking into, and knowing the actual law and knowing your rights and knowing what a citizen means versus a non-citizen and what each gets because of their title. So lots of things to look into. Same with like the Federal Reserve and how they're not really like a complete federal agency. They have a component of being a private company. Why did we get off of the gold standard? What was the purpose and benefit of that? What was their motivation? There's just so many. It's just like questions after questions after questions, and it just makes you want to dig a little bit further and find out more information. And usually when you do that, you go past the official narrative. And I really love history, so it's like, why are there so many buildings that are have stories underground? It's kind of like there was a mud flood potentially, or that there was like, you know, cities built on top of cities. Why was that? Why is there just like this whole piece of history hidden below the ground? And you know, are there cities underground, tunnels? You know, like, let's look at old maps and let's explore this. Let's look at why Tartaria is a prevalent country in the 1500s and then is just erased from history. It's just completely irrelevant and never talked about. Why is that? You know, why are these buildings in Utah so big in grandeur? Look up Jon Levi, Jon space Levi. His videos are insane. I haven't watched all of them because there's so many, but I found them last year. And he just takes pictures and documents and things, and he just questions and he ponders, and he's like, this is the official narrative. This is the building. Do you think this lines up? No? If so, what could it be? So that was really crazy to look into buildings, and especially in Utah, and looking at the technology they had at the time, and it's like, how is that humanly possible? So there's just a lot below the surface that's just not discussed or talked about, and you're like, is our history actually true to the fullest? Like, maybe there's parts that are true, but it's all written in this history book compiled by these certain people who are only going to know so much. And I think that's the biggest thing. I think we like to think and claim that we know so much about history, and we don't want to repeat the past, and this is what happened in the past. And I'm like, but is it? Is that the full story and context? Because there were black slave owners in the South, and Irish were slaves as well. And so it's like, let's have a more nuanced discussion about history versus these black and white things that are meant to keep us polarized, and how we always talk about Hitler. But there's so many other people in history that we could be talking about besides just him. But it's our go-to. We reference everything back to that. Why was this narrative drilled into our whole society? And it's like, let's talk about Mao, let's talk about Stalin, let's talk about the Armenian genocide, let's talk about what's happening in these countries now. And instead of just repeating this one narrative, there's so many other bad apples or bad people in society that have done evil things, and yet we always just go back to this one. And it's not to say we shouldn't talk about it at all, but we shouldn't just talk about that. Same with kind of like looking at alternative theories. We shouldn't just look at the official narrative and be like, okay, whatever, that sounds good, I'm gonna move on. Like, let's peel it back and let's uncover what the people who told us those narratives at the time didn't want us to know. And that's, I think, the important thing to look into. So this was a long video, as my videos always seem to be. It did not rain, so I'm not going to push my luck and keep going. I hope you guys have a great day. I hope this was fun for you to watch, all in good fun. I do not want to receive a huge long comment explaining how I'm super wrong and shouldn't think these things. So if you cannot do that, that'd be really great, because I probably won't delete the comment, but I really don't want to have to respond to it. So yeah, this is my channel. I talk about all the weird things. I appreciate you watching, I really do, and hearing me out, because it is a little scary to put your unattractive or just not widely accepted theories onto the world. So thank you so much, have a great day, and just keep questioning. Bye.